What a wonderful reminder, particularly when it's dull and dreary on this Sunday. This morning, if you haven't figured out the puzzle already, the theme is light for lots of reasons. You'll find out this morning, or be reminded, I should say, how important light is in our lives. And I thought that would be an appropriate thing since we are dedicating stained glass windows, which are all about light, that we would do that theme to remind us all. And so I have a short reading from the Gospel of Matthew this morning that concerns another aspect of light. So I'll be reading from chapter 5, 14 to 16. Listen to the words of Matthew about light. Jesus says, basically, you are the light of the world. A city built on a hill can't be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Here ends the words of Matthew. Thanks be to God. I'd like you to sit with me for a moment. And I'd like you to take a breath in and out. And I'd like you to look at the light that remains in this room. For it is a room. Yes, we would like to hope that this is the holy place, and we know, because God is in us, that He is here with us in this holy place. But this morning, look around. Look up. Isn't there something about the kinds of light that God has given us that brings quiet and maybe a little peace to our hearts and our minds? So take it in and ponder the gift of God to you this day. This morning we are reflecting on light, the physical light that God created for our world, and the spiritual light that is Jesus. As John tells us, using his words in the gospel, again Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. You know, Scripture talks a lot about light. I find 45 or 50 verses and texts teaching us just what this light is all about. The idea of light, isn't it amazing? And God created a wave of energy that can be seen by the naked eye. And that naked eye looks around, and this morning we see the light of God. Isn't it funny how the tiniest bit of light can push away the darkness? Watch what happens when we again lighten up our worship space. Man-made light. But isn't that also light that God has given us to help us read see where we walk, know that there is hope for light at the end of the tunnel that you are on. And again, John tells us in chapter 1, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. I think many of us might have stories about being left in the dark, both metaphorically and physically. Some children, as well as some adults, also have to sleep with the light on. I won't ask for a show of hands who has night lights all over their house. Yeah, isn't that interesting? You need the night light to help you. Some people, have never experienced pitch black because they've only lived in an urban city and environments where there are all kinds of artificial lights. They've never actually been out in the field, in the country, or on a farm where there are no street lights, there are no porch lights, there are no artificial lights. I think of a time when I was directing Camp Cavell near the Port Huron area for several years, and we were a ministry through the YWCA to bring urban city children, and we would have them get on the bus and have their parents and moms or dads pack their bags, and they would come up to north of Lexington onto a camp of 55 acres, and when they would come, it was daylight. And they would get off the bus, and they were all okay, and then they looked around and went, What are you doing? This isn't what I thought. Several of them would get off with the boom boxes. This was earlier on. Everybody remember? You put that whole big boom box thing. It always amazed me. Right on their shoulder, and it, they couldn't plug it in when the batteries wore out, you see. But the most amazing experience there that really opened my eyes and touched my heart, and these were probably 120 8 to 14-year-olds. The first night, the counselors, as it got dark, would lead them to the campfire, right? But the campfire wasn't lit until they all got there. And do you know that as the kids came out of the cabin, it was pitch dark? Some of those children started crying. Some of those kids froze in place because they were afraid of the darkness, genuinely, and wanted to know why there were no lights. For some, they never appreciated or learned to look at the night sky. For others, and probably fewer than my memory would like to remember, actually learned that there were other sources of light than the flashlight or the house light or the lamp light. And we would get on the beach, and the head counselor would light the bonfire. And how many of you love bonfires? Yeah, I figured this was a safe place to have camaraderie with my people. There is something to me about the fascination of not just a little fire, but a huge, warm, glowing fire. It gives you warmth, and yes, indeed, it gives you light to find your marshmallows. And yes, indeed, isn't there something fascinating about staring at those flames and watching, for me, how they dance? And I am one that will sit until the coals are red hot and the flame has died down. How many people in your family or your friends that as soon as the pomp and circumstance of those flames have died down say, oh, time to go home. You know, we are all different in how we appreciate the light. I, for one, and I'm wondering how many of you, still like to sit and look at that glowing red and white hot pot of coals. It's there. And they still seem to have life in them, don't they? What a wonderful gift God has given us. Now, when those coals die down, some people automatically, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, they've got their flashlight in their pocket or it's right by them at the campfire, and when it returns to just a speck of light and primarily dark to go back to the cabin or go back home, boom, on comes the flashlight. And I imagine God sees all of these little people, and what they see is these little lights. Boom, 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 boom. It's probably a pretty sight for him. But I wonder sometimes if he thinks, did you ever look up? Did you ever look up before you leave? Because when there is the absence of artificial light, the created light of God is still present on a lot of nights. And what do you see? Anybody know what's the first thing you look for in the night sky when it's... Wow. Okay. I heard moon. I heard the North Star, did I not? Yes. The North Star, which shines the brightest. And I heard Big Dipper. What else did I hear? That about covers it right now. And then when it gets pitch dark, up here, we get to see two other phenomenons occasionally. Shooting stars, Irene said. Aurora borealis, somebody else said. Or for us commoners, the northern lights. Lightning bugs. Now we're talking. And what about my personal favorite, the Milky Way? Holy smokes, I should say holy stars. You know, have you ever seen that it is so vast and so multitudinous that it, as they do now, blows my mind? That is the created light of God. So why do we worry so much about being stranded in the dark? Wow. All right. Here's what John 1 says in verse 5. It keeps going. This is the message we have heard from him, meaning Jesus, and we proclaim it to you, that is me this morning, that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. That God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. So what do we think about that? We think that God can transform darkness and does transform darkness into light. That's God's grace for us. Perhaps we could learn to appreciate those moments when various forms of God's light pierces our darkness, when depression overcomes us, when we fear the unknown darkness in our lives, when someone calls and brings more darkness and heaps it onto us about more bad news. It is these times that believing that God in his Son Jesus is light, shining through to you individually, should bring you hope, rationality as you look, and yes, even laughter. Folks, that's why some people, when you have a sad story to tell, or a hopeless story to tell, and someone comes to you and you see joy on their face, not to resent them and say, well, boy, they don't understand. No, what you should say is, thank you, God, because I, through them, can see your light, and my life can be a little bit lighter. When, like a warm, flaming fire outside gathers us in and fascinates us by its flame and hot coals, a good friend or family member that surrounds you with your unknown and dispels your unknown darkness, and you feel just a tiny bit better because you've seen the light. Thank God for that person in your life. And then maybe we could remember our Creator's intention for creating us to walk in the light, that we are to reflect the most important light, the light of Jesus. 2 Corinthians 4 says this, "For God who said, 'Let the light shine out of darkness,' has shone in our hearts the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ." I'll close with this. There was an English writer, you might know of him, named John Ruskin, and I think he gives us a good picture of how we, each one of us, can reflect the light in this life. John says this, "Before electricity, streets were lit by gas lights. At evening, many folks would go to their windows and look out into the dark streets to see the lamps being lit by the lamplighter. They looked not to see who the lamplighter was. They looked to see the trail of lights behind him. People never knew him. They never met him, or they've never really seen him, just a silhouette. But they did learn about the lamplighter from the trail of lights he left behind." Don't be afraid of the dark, either inside your heart or outside. But be the light of God like the lamplighter, not to be known for who you are, but for who your lamplighter is. God bless you as you keep lighting the lights for others in your life. Amen.